Today, I'm going to turn a bunch of your book covers into winning Facebook ads, and you're going to watch me do it. Yes, it is the Image Workshop, and we're back for episode 2. I'm your host, David Gaughran, and this week we're going to focus a lot on correct font choices and how to pair fonts in your design with the fonts that your designer has chosen on your book cover, and when you should do it and when you shouldn't do it. And we got a range of books we're going to play with here today. We got dark romance, we have YA, we have crime, and a bunch more. So let's just dive in and start making covers. Okay, we'll start with something straightforward this week, which will illustrate this week's theme, which is appropriate font choice, because I think there's a really well-designed cover. It's UK crime, I'm guessing. Let's actually verify that before I go too far here with my theorizing. But it's UK crime, Carolyn, Mahony, Cry from the Grave, Harry Briscombe series, book 1. Because this cover is so nailed on for the genre, even down to the font choice, I thought it'd be a good one to kick off with. Let's just confirm it is crime fiction. No egg on my face. Okay, it is crime fiction, UK crime fiction. And yeah, let's just dive right in, because I feel like this cover is really nailed on for the genre. So that's why we've got to be careful with our own font choices when we layer elements onto the design to make sure we're reinforcing that. All, crime, thriller, mystery, suspense books will have some obvious motif on the cover, whether it be a literal crime scene like this here, or you might see a gun or a bullet or a body chucked out on the ground or police sirens flashing, something like that to indicate a crime has occurred, a murder has occurred. And this obviously does that. Now, I don't know, unless it's unless this lady is called Harry, which might be Harriet. This looks more like, going with the tagline here, one woman's search for the truth. This looks more like she's related to the victim in some way. But let's see when we get into it. First of all, let's kill the white space. You'll know from last week that my preferred method of designing Facebook ads, and this is a great example of why, is to take the cover art and use that as the background and include the book cover in the design for sure, because that really helps conversion. Last week we focused a lot about composition, like the framing of the image, like literally where do you put the background art and where do you put the cover. And the challenge we have in this design is the same one we had in several last week. It's a pretty common one, so we'll run through it quickly, which is the hero or some important character in the book is in the center of the image here, because the designer wants to center that on the book cover and create the light around there. So that's where your eye is drawn to. But that creates a problem for us about where to put the book cover, because it just looks a bit awkward like this. And so my preferred solution, which I use in, I'd say, 3/4 of cases, if not more, is to zoom in like this. And then it leaves a little bit of space. We've manufactured a little bit of space for the book cover. But it's important what you zoom in on, what you exclude, and what you retain. So here we're keeping the tree, which I suppose is a little bit creepy, and it's just dark. We've lost a lot of light there. The light from the windows is gone. So let's try and get that back. Let's go the other way. There, I prefer that kind of framing. Now we might fiddle with it as we get into the design, but I don't want to cover up those windows, so I don't want to go too far here. The only thing I'm reticent about covering up is this crime scene tape, but it's not highlighted a lot in the actual design. But that's just giving me an idea for what we might do. In fact, let's do it right away before I forget that fleeting thought. We're going to make our own crime scene tape and really double down on that theme, because it seems like the obvious thing to do here. So I like to go with a brighter yellow, just so it pops a little bit more. Don't want to go too much into the greeny green. Well, you could try and match. Okay, so you could try and match the colors from the cover here. This is something we spoke a lot about last week. By the way, here's a tip from one of you guys in the comments last week. So I do check all those, so please do feel free to comment. Lee Gable pointed out that there's other ways to move around the layers here. I've been doing it manually here with the back and forward and to the front and to the back. But if this visual representation of layers, which I was only using for selecting elements, you can actually drag and drop there. Oh, let's try that again. The perils of live TV, children. Okay. There we go. You see, I've moved the book cover into the middle layer, and now this soon-to-be crime scene tape is covering the book. And if I want to move that back, that might seem like a small thing, but when some designs get very, very complicated, and you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different layers, and selecting the right little one can be an act of sheer frustration. So thank you very much, Lee, for that tip. And now we all benefit from it. Lovely. Okay, so there's our crime scene tape. Now, you do have the option of matching the colors in the book. So Canva has picked them out here. You'll see this fetching green color here. There's another way of doing it. It doesn't seem like it's quite a match. That could be an optical illusion because this is surrounded by a lot of black here. Let's double check that. So here's another tip that you guys, about 1,000 of you gave this tip in the comments and by email and by text message. And a couple of people knocked on my front door to tell me I was an idiot as well, because there's a much easier way of selecting the colors in the document. I don't know if this is something I forgot about or I was ignoring because I thought it was a pro feature, but this little pipette here, it's actually better than the really convoluted method I was using. You can just pick a color from the design using this little droplet or pipette here. And you see how it zooms in very cleverly, and you can pick the exact pixel. So if I wanted to match this kind of tarpaulin over the cover, I could do that. If I wanted to match the exact shade of the crime scene tape in this image, I could do that, but you can see it's a little bit muddy. If I wanted to pick out the green and, you know, really help that pop, I could do that. And I kind of like that, you know. In fact, let's go with it for a minute, and then we'll check out the yellow, and you can tell me at the end which one is your favorite. Let's put some. We've a bit of a difficulty here in that there's a lot of darkness around this, so we're going to do our usual trick where we put in a shadow. By the way, that's edit image. If you didn't catch that, click effects, shadow, and I always go for the glow. You have a few other options here, and here you can increase the size of it. So sometimes that looks terrible, sometimes it looks good. It really depends. I almost always increase the intensity unless there's a very light background. Then it can look a bit silly. But I think here it's fine. I might increase the size a little bit. See, too much and then it kind of defeats the purpose, especially with a darker background. It won't provide that kind of contrast. It won't provide that lift off the background. And then I just readjust the book cover because it always goes a bit funny after applying that shadow. And there. Okay, I think that's looking fine. In fact, I'm going to dial down the aggressiveness of the size of that. I think it's just a little bit too much. Okay, that's enough fussing. Now, what we need here is two things. We need a price. I think it's almost always better to put in the price, but feel free to test that yourself and follow your own data. I can only give you kind of shortcuts here and there based on my own experience. The price of this book is 99p or 99 cent. So we're definitely putting in the price. I think you'd be crazy not to when it is so cheap. I presume this author, it's not on sale. That's actually the regular price. So we've seen the strategy a lot before. UK crime is kind of like US romance in that it's the most competitive genre. It's the biggest genre. It's the most price sensitive genre. So it's quite normal for prices to be at the lower end, as opposed to something like literary fiction or historical fiction or nonfiction, where the prices will be at the higher end, for a whole variety of reasons we won't go into right now. But you'll see that the other books are priced higher. There's good series branding there, and we want to kind of reflect that in our design. So 99p, we're definitely going to shout about that. Let's put in some price tag up here, or maybe let's do this. I don't want to get too kind of blocky there. This might be a bit nicer. Now, let's get our text. Now, I want to think about the font, because this font is such a signifier in the UK of, like, you know, either psychological thriller or crime, or a crime thriller, that I want something to match it. Now, I don't know. By the way, if anyone has, here's a tip I'm going to actually request, especially from the professional designers might know this. I found a variety of sites where you can upload like a cover image or any JPEG or whatever, and it'll tell you what fonts are used in it. But I don't like any of them. They're usually trying to push their own fonts, and I don't find them matching that good. Like, they tend to ignore all those free Google fonts, which I'd really like something which would match with those and tell you what to use. So if you do have a tool, definitely let me know in the comments, and I'll share it with everybody and give you credit, of course. That's the important part. A whole jar of virtual kudos for you to gorge on. Right, so we got to put a price tag in here. We're going to put that 99p. We got to put some text here. And I like putting in a review quote which squares the genre, as we went into detail in last time, or a tagline. Like, this tagline is good, but I'll tell you why I'm not going to use it. So it's one woman's search for the truth, right? Which is presumably this woman here, which makes me think it's not the detective. That makes it more sound like the victim's mother or sister or daughter or spouse or something like that. Now, taken in isolation, that could be inspirational fiction, it could be nonfiction, it could be all sorts of things. But with all the other elements present, it definitely you definitely think more in the terms of a victim's spouse or something. But it's a bit long for there, and I don't quite like it for a marketing kind of. I think we can do a little bit better than that. So let's see if we can find a quote or some other little bit of text, which is, oh, hold on, right there. I feel like this should have been the tagline. With all due respect to that tagline, I like it. Secrets can't stay buried forever. Because before I even read the blurb, right, I'm covering it up with my hand because I'm an inveterate cheat. But before I even read the blurb, that to me says this is a cold case. The body, because secrets can't stay buried forever. So that feels like that someone was murdered a long time ago, and now the body has been discovered, and then some big conspiracy is about to be unearthed about who killed them and all that kind of stuff. Let's look at the blurb and see if I was right. Hannah Walker is living in limbo. 6 years ago, her daughter was abducted and her world fell apart. Okay, so it's a grieving mother. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, and they've just found her body, what they think might be her body, in some local garden. So she was just kind of processing the death or getting over it or moving on in some sense, getting some kind of closure. And then this happens and it reopens all the old wounds. That's a great setup for a book. Yeah, so secrets can't stay buried forever. For me, that's like one woman's search for the truth is good, but secrets can't stay buried forever. That's a cold case murder. Like I'm using that. I'm not even going to look at the review quotes. Obviously, if this is my ad and I was putting serious and or real money behind it, I would definitely spend more time looking through the review quotes in case there's anything that really squares the genre. Okay, so let's reduce the size of this for a moment. We'll put in our tagline here. Now you can see a problem with the green. We're probably going to have to use black text or something darker. I'm not great personally at finding colors for text other than white or black. Everything always looks a bit funny to me. That probably speaks to my lack of experience and qualifications and abilities more than a reflection on the colors themselves. But I think it keeps my life a bit simpler as well. Secrets can't stay buried forever. And I see, like, should that have a period at the end or not? That's the kind of thing that I would spend like an hour on if I was designing this for myself, and I won't let you suffer through that. Let's leave the coloring for the moment and just sort out the font, because the font is important. Now, what would I go with here? Something kind of clean and thin, like an ad for a Norwegian dentist would feel appropriate. And I know, actually, no, just the font. Glacial Indifference. What a name. I like whoever comes up with the names for these fonts. I'm a huge fan. Glacial Indifference. You can see it there. It's that same kind of thin, slender. And by the way, here's a tip, right? When you're looking for fonts, in Canva, sometimes it will recommend fonts here. It uses a bit of machine learning or AI, I guess, to try and match the fonts in the document. Sometimes the suggestions are good, sometimes they're not great. It'll show you your recently used, always handy if you've got a few go-to fonts. And these are ones that I've uploaded on the left here. These are ones that I either downloaded for free somewhere. There's loads of free fonts on the internet. Just make sure you've got the rights to use them. Like Google Fonts is a great resource, loads and loads of fonts, but there's loads more sites. And then you can buy fonts. Maybe I'll put a link in my description to my favorite font store, where I've gotten some of these lovely kind of handwritten fonts, which are very unusual and really helped you to cultivate a distinctive brand image. Definitely don't use Canva Sans, which everyone uses in their ads because it's the default font and because it's kind of good, but you just see it everywhere. And then once you do start seeing it everywhere, you'll never use it again. Trust me. Down here, popular fonts. So you get all these ones for free with Canva, right? Because Canva is free. All these fonts are free. You're free to use them in commercial designs. If you have Canva Pro, all these fonts with the little hat on the left, so you get access to an even larger range. But if you scroll past that as a free Canva user, you should get down to this section here, English fonts, and you'll see most of those, I'd say like half or more, are all free. So don't think that you have to pay for Canva Pro just to get access to more fonts. There's so many in this interface before you even upload anything. So make sure to go through those. We won't go through all of them because we've already got our font, I think. But one thing, when you're picking a font, make sure to check it in bold and not in bold, because some of them look very different. Like this looks like a much better match to that than when it was bold, right? But we might use the bold for the price to make it kind of stand out a bit more. So I don't like that bold. I think that's good. I think we might just get it to fit a little better here. Let's just drag it out. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Now, a review quote squaring the genre, or a gushing blurb from one of the big writers in the genre, or a review from a major newspaper or organization that readers will have recognized might be better. But I think this is pretty good as it is, so we're gonna leave it like that. And then the price, that's pretty easy. It's 99p. But let me just show you something about way people. Let's pretend we're doing an American ad, right? 99 cent. Some people do this, which I hate, because someone upbraided me for this once, and I've never forgotten it. I love a good upbraiding. I was being lazy and just using the C, and he just said, "Would you not like take 2 seconds?" I think it was actually in one of my books, which is fair enough. That's pretty bad. I should have known that. So there's the actual cent sign, but here's why some people don't use it. It looks ugly, because you might remember I said last time that font designers often spend a lot of time on the lettering, obviously, but then sometimes the numbers are an afterthought. Not in this case. I think the numbers are done very well, but then like the special characters, like currency symbols, things like that, they seem strange. Like they didn't spend a lot of time on them. For those reasons, and all the ones I shared last week, I like kind of manually doing the currency symbols. Sometimes I do them in a different font, which is fine because it doesn't stick out as much. Anyway, in this case, we are going to make this nice and small, which I also think psychologically makes it feel a bit cheaper. But anyway, it definitely looks better in this case. I think that's inarguable. And then we just, by the way, if you're trying to move something in Canva, it has all this kind of, things will snap into place and it'll try and be intelligent and line it up for you. But sometimes that means you can't get things exactly where you want. Just zoom in, right? Just zoom in like that. And then you get really granular placement. See, I can get it perfectly where I want now. And yeah, that's cool. So I'm going to try and, hold on, I'm going to group these things together. Hold on, let me lock this in place. Okay, so I'm going to lock down the background, and that'll allow me to grab these elements here on their own, group them together. So now I can move this around as I like. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to make this bigger. And by the way, I sometimes see people doing like, instead of 99 cents, they'll do something like this. And I just don't think it looks good. Maybe this is personal preference. Do let me know if you think I'm talking nonsense. But they write it with the dollar sign, 0.99. Let me just show you. And I just don't think it looks as good, just in the design sense. I don't think there's anything like about buyer psychology there, but I think, yeah, just not having the dollar sign, I don't know, 99 cent feels cheaper to me than 0.99. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, I think it looks better regardless of buyer psychology reasons. So we have this. We want to make it bigger. Maybe we want to make it bold just because we really want to shout about 99 cent. It's cheap. Readers should know that. So let's see if this needs to look, what does it look like as bold? Maybe. Why won't it let me select that? Okay, now here we go. But I need to move the, so we need to ungroup that, move the currency symbol. I kind of like this. I don't know if I'd go with bold, but we'll leave it for now. Yeah, I think that's done, except for one thing. Let's just check what yellow looks like. And this looks very nicely designed. We've got the matching colors. We've got the similar palette and all that. You could maybe mess with the background if you wanted to, but I think it's fine. Especially people viewing it like this. Yeah, I think that's a good ad. The only thing I would check I would probably run two versions, right? I'd probably run this version, and then I would check what if we really leaned into that kind of crime scene tape, like that. So you tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Do you prefer this version or this version? Do let me know. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let me quickly show you something while we're speaking about fonts and font choices. I just want to quickly return to a design. You might remember this design. It's one of my favorite book covers from last time, and I think we did a pretty good design there. But something was nagging me, and I made a couple of changes just after we finished recording. And actually, if you saw the thumbnail on YouTube, you'll see that there is a slight difference here between that and that. So I just want to show you, and I think this is what really elevates the design, these last couple of touches. Whether or not you like the love hearts or not, you might remember I went back and forth about that. But the font choice, you'll see the font choice there really matches well. Now, I wasn't able to find out exactly what font that is, but just spending 5 minutes in Canva looking through that huge list of free fonts that I showed you, I found this one, which I'm pretty sure is a free font. It's called Bobby Jones, and it matches up very nicely there. So I'll just show you in very quickly how I did that. So you just grab, so you can change the shape just by clicking on the shape here and selecting whatever you want. In our case, a love heart, and just maneuver it slightly different there. Grab the text, and Bobby Jones was the one that I found, and let's just confirm it is free. Yeah, it is free, and there's a couple of different options there, which is always nice when font designers do that and greatly appreciated. And you can see this is free, but in actual fact, the book is $3.99, so let's just do that. And then to give the kind of shadow effect, I think what I did was I copied and pasted that, and then I think I picked out the pink here. Let's do that. The little peepette, as I learned from all you guys last time in the comments. I think I picked out something like this. I love the way that zoom feature on this. It's really, really cool. Anyway, and then here comes in handy the other tip from you guys last week about the position. So I click on position, go to layers, and now you see there's multiple layers. And so I want that one sitting behind the darker pink. And then I can just kind of manipulate it slightly. Where do I want it to go? Let's do it kind of like that, maybe. Yeah, something like that. I won't fiddle with it for too long. Okay, so there you see, like, often I make a design and then I sleep on it, and then the next morning and I remember like the one last step, which I think really, really elevates it. And I think that's the step there. And like, don't be disheartened when you start out. Like, this was me trying to design the thumbnail for the first episode, and like, it's pretty terrible stuff. But then, you know, after going through all these different iterations, and some of them were presets in Canva, some I did myself, and I'm just literally throwing things like the first draft of the book, just throwing things out until something clicks, and then this popped out, and I was like, aha, I can work with that. And then it finished up like this, which I think is pretty pro. Anyway, that's all a bit meta. So let's get on to designing more book covers. Okay, so this is Do You Believe in Monsters with Jim Melvin, which is epic fantasy, but I'm hoping it's YA, because I'm getting a YA vibe. Oh, yeah, there we go. Teen and young adult epic fantasy ebooks, great. I am a little bit relieved because I got a solid YA vibe off that cover. Yeah, good quote as well for squaring that. Won't help with the design, but just in general, exploring the struggles of those coming of age. So that coming of age is a real tell that it's YA. This I liked, which I spotted when I first loaded it up. Wild Fantasy Ride. I think that's our review quote. Obviously, I would usually spend a considerable amount of time going through the reviews trying to find the perfect one. That sounds pretty good to me. I will probably slot that in there. Okay, so let's fill the white space. I think we can do this one quite quickly. It's fairly straightforward in terms of the design challenge. Again, the question is, where do you put the book? I think you don't want to occlude like this figure. You don't want this guy shoved down too far. It's a landscape piece of art, so a slightly different challenge in that you can't zoom in any further than we are now without creating some white space. Okay, you could put a little banner down here in the bottom. Sometimes that works, but like, you don't want to cut off the monster. the titular monster. You gotta be careful how you say that. But I think this is the perfect spot here. You know, might even move it a little to the side so we get a bit more of that light. I really like that light that's shining from behind the monster to delineate it from the dark background. So maybe something like this, just to bring in a bit more color. And what price are we working with here? I have these weird prices because I'm in Europe, so I get weird European prices, but it's $2.99 in US. So let's put that in our ad. We're going to want one of my handy little square things, which I always use to make price buttons or banners. You just pick out the square and then you can manipulate it whatever size you want. And then if you want to change the shape, you can just click shape up here and, make it a kind of a sticker, price sticker. You can make it, anything at all. It's quite flexible. Now I wouldn't use this red color because it doesn't pop at all. And we really want to do that. So I could end up doing something like this. Let's just put that in the right place. But see, the color just kind of blends in and gets lost. So you want to pick something a bit more vibrant. Now, my go-tos are always, fire engine red or bright yellow. But this has got some lovely colors to pick from. So we'll use our little pipette tool. So we select the banner, click on the color, click on the plus sign here, and there's a little pipette. You can manually, bring it to whatever you like, or you can use this, pick a color from the design and go in and really just pick something that's already there. Yeah. It's not always perfect, and sometimes it doesn't come out the way you think, just because colors look different depending on what colors are beside it, without getting too technical. Yeah, I like the idea of, so if you want to zoom in and really get the color that you want, you can do that. This is the kind of thing that I fuss over endlessly, and it's not unpleasant. It's kind of like meditative, if that's the right word. Now, I really like that red. I really like that. But I'm also noticing this purple could be cool. Hold on a second. Let's get our little pipette. Oh, yeah. Right on the eyeball. I like that. Maybe a touch darker so we can manipulate a tiny bit here. Like that, maybe. Let's see how it looks with some text on it, but I like that. What was our text? A wild fantasy ride. I would leave out the name unless it's someone that, like, if that guy Dave Schreiber, I don't know who that is personally, but if that's somebody that the audience is, it's going to mean something to them, then I would put in the name. But if they're not going to know it, even if it is, a really renowned journalist and all that kind of stuff, I don't think readers care unless they know the name. Certainly not in the 2 seconds that you're trying to grab their attention. On reflection, they might, whatever. But if it's not something or someone they immediately recognize, like if it's some regional newspaper that's important in its region, but most of your readers aren't going to know what it is, I wouldn't use the name. But if it's something like New York Times or Stephen King or something where everyone's going to know the name, I would use it. That's my simple rule of thumb. As crude as it might sound, I think it's the right approach. Okay, let's put in our really on the nose quote. Now you'll see that's the default font, Canvas Sans. We want to find something a bit more appropriate. Now, the reason why I picked up this cover is because fantasy, kind of like historical fiction, often has these very stylized fonts. Other genres use them as well, like maybe historical romance, paranormal romance, historical fiction, epic fantasy. And people then try to match the fonts because that's often a good idea in your design, to match the fonts. And the problem is, if you use something very stylized, let me just show you very quickly. This is not a free Canva font. This is one that I purchased. It's this kind of 80s neon font. That might look good. That kind of font choice might look good on a contemporary romance cover. And sometimes it looks good in the design. Sometimes it doesn't. I think this looks cool not for this, for like, like some kind of, retro 80s kind of thing, or, contemporary romance kind of thing. I just don't think it's very legible for an ad on Facebook where people are scrolling. I think an over stylized font like that, where it's kind of harder to read, isn't great for your main text. Maybe for some secondary text in the background of the image, but for your main text, I would go with something plainer and easier to read. So in the example of the crime novel, we're really trying to match the font there. And I think that looked good. I don't think in this case you should try and match the fonts. Like, you're using something really stylized like this computery font. It's not going to be easy to read when someone's scrolling through Facebook or on their phone or whatever. So I would go with something plainer like this, maybe this Poppins font. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think, something plain and inoffensive often does the job here. So Wild Fantasy Ride. I'm not sure about white text on this background. Maybe that's a bit better. The advantage of going with the red color that we considered is that white looks really good on it and really pops. But I think this is fine. I always choose red, so let's mix it up a little bit. Okay, so we want a price tag, and we will use the exact same color. And we'll probably just do something like this. I'll make this cover a little bigger. Okay, and as with the crime cover, we're going to use the same font, and we'll just bold it for the price tag, okay? And what do we say it was? $2.99, I think. Now, I would include the price, unless it's, when it gets to like $4.99 and higher, I start thinking, is there a better way to present this? But at $2.99, I would definitely include the price. If you don't include it, you'll get more clicks, but your conversion will suffer, and I think it works out worse. If you do include it, you'll get less clicks, meaning your clicks will be more expensive. Your click-through rate will be lower on Facebook. But when you factor in conversion, I think it's going to be better. Now, I think regular viewers will know exactly what I'm going to do with this currency symbol. I like to do them separately and make them smaller. I think it just looks more attractive. And I think in buyer psychology terms, well, for this buyer here, the one designing the ad, it always makes things feel a little cheaper. That's not what I want to do. Let's try that again. Yeah, these text boxes can be a little bit frustrating. I wish they would snap a little better on Canva. The one thing I want them to snap into place is the one thing they don't. But no, I like Canva. I think it's very cleverly designed. The way that things kind of snap into place really helps when you are an idiot like me who doesn't know how to design anything. Okay, I'm going to lock this background into place. That little symbol up there, lock. I'm also going to lock this bar into place. So then I can group these two guys together, the currency symbol and a thing, and make them whole once more. Just so I can fill the space like that. Now, it's not a discount, so I maybe shouldn't be shouting about it this much. It's like the cheaper the price is, the bigger I make the price tag. Like if it's free, it takes up like a big chunk of the image. And then, I noticed and this is not something I'm doing consciously. I just noticed subconsciously, I start making the price tag smaller and smaller, the more expensive it gets. Like I wanted the viewer or the reader to focus on other things other than the price. But look, $2.99 is still very cheap for a book. And epic fantasy novels, even in YA, tend to be a good length. So it's not like you're getting a tarted up novella. You're getting 330 pages of fiction there for $2.99. Which is still quite cheap. And compared to traditionally published books in the genre, of course, it's going to be very competitively priced. So I would shout about it. And don't listen to that inner voice who thinks it's too expensive. I think that's fine. And there we go. I think that's as good as it's going to get today. Yeah, I'd be tempted to just let's do what we did last time and just compare the two colors. So we will get our little pipette out. That doesn't sound right, does it? And we'll go back to that red. I want to see what it looks like now that the design is finished. The second I get happy with design, it probably speaks to my character, and not in a good way. The second I get happy with design, I immediately start tearing it apart and think, what could I do better? Yeah, maybe this. Now, this is where the layer thing comes in handy. So where is my little... Oh no, I've locked that down. That's why I won't. Unlock. Let's just grab that. And unlock it. See, it won't let you change the color. So it doesn't just... Locking it down doesn't just stop you moving it. It also means that you can't change the colors or anything like that. Anyway, let's put this back where it was. And change all this black text to white. I think white looks much better on red. It provides more of a contrast. You'll see it pops a lot more. And that's what we want, you know. So there we go. So that's one version of Jim Melvin's cover for ad for Do You Believe in Monsters? And then there's the kind of purpley one. So there's this one or this one. Let me know which one you prefer. I'm going to stick with the purple for now, although I could see the red one winning if I did a few ad tests. I like to do two different versions and let the people decide, let the readers decide which is best. And I often get surprised. Anyway, let's move on and do more covers. Okay, next up is Necessary Sins by Elizabeth Bell, which I think is historical fiction. Actually, it's family saga end of historical fiction rather than being, you know, historical romance or anything like that. I really like that series branding. That's great. Okay, lots of stuff to chew through here. Lots of quotes from authors in the genre. Olivia Hawker, she's a fantastic author of historical fiction, and she's given us a great quote as well. Okay, we're off and running. First of all, let's fill the space because we can't have any white space. White space is death. And I haven't quite been given the good background cover art. I've been given one layer of it. And sometimes you'll get that off your designer. In this case, it's really, really helpful, in fact, because that's what I would have wanted for the background is this couple. Presumably, this is some kind of illicit love affair. It looks like it's crossing racial lines as well as, you know, being a man of God who shouldn't be dillying or dallying with the fair sex. Yeah, so... What I'm trying to avoid here, by the way, if I just undo what I did there. So this is how it would naturally look if you just zoomed in the minimum. And the problem is there's nowhere really to put the book. You can't cover up the woman. And then if you cover up him, you're making him look like a human sandwich board, which is not good. You see that a lot, actually, in amateur designs. I don't know why. Maybe because it's just easy, but it doesn't mean it's good. But the other crucial thing is you're covering up the crucifix. Now, my grandmother was a huge fan of the Thornbirds, which had a similar setup in that it was, you know, a love affair between a woman and a priest. And it was such a huge hit in historical fiction that you definitely don't want to cover up that aspect because now he just looks like some kind of like aristocrat in formal wear wearing a chain. And now you know he's a priest, and that changes the calculus here completely in terms of the spiciness of the setup rather than the action within the pages. But yeah, no, it makes it much more spicy. So we don't want to cover up the girl. We don't want to cover up the you don't want to make him look like a sandwich board. And you also definitely don't want to cover up the crucifix because that's a major plot point, presumably. Yeah. Okay. So something like this, we might zoom in a little bit more. You don't want to crowd her out completely, right? So if you do that, then you make it look like the story's all about him. And it's not, it's about them. So I think it's important to reflect that. I think it just looks better. So now we will put in our usual shadow. So that's, by the way, edit image, click effects over here, glow. I always go with glow. Feel free to try the others. I think this looks best because it just delineates around a little delineation around the entire cover rather than on just one side or the other. I think that's fine. I think we can cover it up a little bit and it's still obvious from any distance that he's a priest and they shouldn't be engaging in any hanky-panky, which they presumably do. Okay, so next we'll put in our price bar. I think we can actually do this one quite quickly. Boom, boom, boom. Now it's picking out a color automatically from the design, which I don't like in this case. I'm going to go for something a bit brighter because there's a lot of kind of earthy tones here. And I want something Maybe not like hot pink, but more like pastel-y pink, if that makes sense. So we go over to the whiter end of the color box here, and that'll do that. Okay. Yeah. Just on this note, especially to the male authors who are watching, please don't describe your book as a romance if it's not actually a romance. And for it to actually be a romance, it doesn't mean it has banging in it, or kissing, or lusting, or any of the other human emotions. It means it must obey the genre conventions. Like romance has conventions that readers expect in the genre, just like thrillers and fantasy and every other type of book. And a romance is primarily defined by having, well, not just a couple, but also a certain type of ending, a certain type of resolution to the story, known as a happy ever after or a happy for now. And if you don't know what those are, you definitely shouldn't be calling your book a romance, and you should do a little bit more research, I respectfully suggest. Now, I'll leave it at that because I'm not a romance reader or author myself, so I don't want to say too much. But you can describe a book as having a romantic thread. That's fine. Or a love story. That's fine. But if you're actually calling it a romance, you need to be very, very careful, or you'll get a lot of angry reviews from people who've bought something which they thought was a romance and it turned out not to be. It just had a couple in it. So this is not a romance as far as I know. It's a historical novel, family saga, end of the historical fiction market, but it has a strong romantic thread. Okay, so what price are we dealing with here on this book? Where are we? $4.99 in the US, pretty standard price for historical fiction. Maybe even considered cheap when compared to, definitely considered cheap when compared to traditionally published historical fiction, which can be very expensive indeed. Probably the most expensive genre out there, aside from perhaps nonfiction. We want to put in this quote from Olivia Hawker. I don't know if we're going to have room to put her name in. Yeah, we're always struggling for space. You can put the name in if you want to. You will know best if an author's name is going to be a real draw in the genre. I know Olivia Hawker had a few #1 hits on Amazon, so it could be the case that it's worth putting it in. The author will know herself what works best. I definitely put quotes around it. As I said last week, there's just something we're hardwired in our brain to bestow more authority on a piece of text when it has quotes around it. In fact, I remember many years ago picking up something in a secondhand bookshop somewhere, and it was a book of quotations, and it was kind of a lighthearted one. And there was a quote on it from somebody, and I can't remember who, on the back, and it just said, "Just because it's a quote doesn't make it true." And that was on a book of quotations, which I thought was quite funny. But yeah, it's our natural inclination. Like, that's why we quote other people. It's like it gives authority to a statement rather than just saying it yourself. Now, what we will change is the font. Instead of just going for the kind of plain this type one like I did last time, I am going to try something a tiny bit different. Now, this is the font. Let's see how good the AI is. I think that's a pretty good choice because that looks like the kind of font that they would typeset historical fiction in. It's very like the font that I choose for my own historical novels. The youngest. I like this a lot. I'm going to go with it. In this case, I think the stylized font works well. I think it adds to the authority of the quote somehow. And yeah, let's see what the numbers look like, because maybe those won't look good. I think those look good. And look, they've even made the currency symbol smaller. A designer after my own heart. Lovely. Okay, we're nearly done here, guys. Yeah. Now, let's see what that looks like in bold. Maybe it won't look as good. Or maybe there isn't a bold version of the font. You see that sometimes, that the designer doesn't do a bold version of the font. So then you've got to decide, are you going to use something else, or just use it without bold? And in this case, I'm going to try without bold so you can see what it looks like, because I always do bold. Let's do something a little bit different. Lock down the background. Now we're going to group together the whole thing here, which is the price and the button. And we click the group, and you can ungroup it afterwards. But for now, we want to keep it in scale. Look at that. Perfect. and then we can easily move it around. We don't want to cover up this guy's head, so let's ungroup that. Click our little square, which we have manipulated into a rectangle. Click the shape up here, and let's go with just a simple circle. Put it into the corner like that. And let's maybe do something like that. I think that's a pretty good ad. I probably, play around with the shape a little bit there, so it doesn't look so. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. Let's call that done. Okay, next up is an actual romance. Venom and Lace by Dani, Antoinette, and Enemies to Lovers romance. Looks like dark romance, definitely spicy looking. Not all monsters hide under your bed. Some of them entice you into theirs. Okay, so I picked this out of the pile because I'm trying to remember the email from the author. I think she said that she's been going back and forth on these two different versions of the cover. I don't know whether that's back and forth on that for Amazon or back and forth on that for ads, but this gives me a lot more to play with here, which is cool. Just looking at the series branding, very strong series branding there. Like you can definitely tell that's a series, and it would seem like the Guy version would fit better with the series branding, but I can see why she's thinking of changing it, or why she's thinking of changing it, at least for advertising, because this is very dark background to work with. So what we're going to do here is we're going to copy this. So you can just make a copy, which is handy when you want to explore kind of two different versions of a design until you decide which way you're going to go. And what we'll do here is we'll get rid of these here. And I just want to show you something. So let's say this is all we had to work with here. And I'm trying to remember Dani's original email, but I remember she was having some kind of struggle. I think it was with designing a good Facebook ad, especially one with the cover in it. I know in romance they often get good results without using the cover, so I don't want to assume my method works across all books, all genres, and all situations. Definitely feel free to test whatever you like and follow the data. I always get concerned when people only look at clicks and only look at cost per click and click-through rate. You've got to look at conversion as well. But if you're seeing better results, like just more sales overall for a cheaper cost, not using the book cover, then do that. But I generally almost always find that the book cover increases conversion to the point where it's more profitable to put it in. But yeah, I can see the issue here, because so you got the tattooed guy here. I'd probably put the cover somewhere there. I wouldn't mind so much covering up that. I don't think that matters so much in this case. But yeah, you're sticking it right under his nose here. You can't really zoom in any further because you're at maximum zoom there already, because it's a portrait shaped piece of cover art. Well, that's not true. You can zoom in even further, but I think it's just getting harder and harder to put this somewhere that doesn't feel weird. And even, I could now deploy all my tricks here. Inject some color into that. You could go up to the edit image section here. You could use different filters and effects. Sorry, I'm manipulating the cover there. I don't want to do that. So you click on the background image, and then you click on the effect that you want here. And there's all sorts of things you could do. You could, to inject some color into it. But I can see why the author was running into issues. That's a difficult, for me at least. Maybe it's my lack of experience in the romance market, but for me that's difficult. And so I can see why she was tempted to look at alternatives. And now the advantage of this is that you've got a lot of color all of a sudden. That gold obviously really pops. The red is something you can work with too. The only criticism I would have here, and I speak as someone not so experienced in the romance market, is that cover isn't necessarily romance. I know it says the word romance there, and the font choices are very kind of romancy. those font choices, those fonts have been pretty popular in romance, I think, since about 2015, 16, 17. So they're a big signifier for the genre. But yeah, that could be fantasy. That could be something else. But I do like the background. So here's what I would suggest to the author. And, if you guys think this is stupid, definitely let me know in the comments. But be gentle. I have a fragile ego. I would like to use this background and the guy cover. And I think that's an option here, because if you look at the Amazon book page, she's done all these lovely graphics here. I think at one point maybe that was the cover, and then she changed to the guy, and maybe she's getting better results now with the guy, but she's having difficulty creating a Facebook ad. So this could be the perfect solution, in fact. So let's go back to having all of them in one design. We're going to keep the guy cover, because I think that's the new cover she's going with, and we're going to go with the old background, because these match. You have the gold in the font, and just the kind of dark romance vibe, I think, matches. Is this guy a snake? Will he be true to me or not? Okay, that's as far as I'll go with that before I make a grievous error. Okay, so I think this could work. So I'm going to zoom in. We want the snake looking cool. I think there's no point having the snake there unless it looks cool. So I think we've got to do some kind of, we'll get the head in anyway. That's definitely important. So something like that. I kind of like that. Here's somewhere where you could definitely flip the image. So click the background image. Make sure you're not clicking the book cover. Click on the background image. Click flip up here, and just flip it horizontally. So if you wanted it to curl like that, let's zoom out a little bit so we can get that kind of curve of the snake. I like that. And you're getting more red from the roses in there, and that could be a cool kind of framing for the book cover. Let's just kill that white space. I'm actually going to lock that down, or else I'll fiddle with that forever. Now we got to put a little shadow on our book cover. Filters, sorry, not filters, effects, glow, turn it up a tiny bit. And I'm going to put it somewhere like here, just so we got a little red on the edges. I think that looks kind of cool. Maybe you'd want the guy bigger. The guy, it is romance after all. You do want the kind of guy to pop, not literally. God, I'm trying not to make any double entendres. Anyway, I think this looks pretty good. Now, for a banner, I'm definitely going to use red here, purely because I think gold won't look good, because I don't think it'll look good, but we can take a look. My gut says red. So this is picking out the gold from the lettering of and this is what I figured would happen, because gold is a tricky color. Where do we want this to go? Maybe here. I don't want to cut off the head of the snake like that. It kind of reduces its power in a weird way. Okay, we are going to move the background. Maybe we want to go along the bottom instead. Well, you don't necessarily have to have a banner. So let's try design, just for the sake of novelty. Let's try design. We're not going with a love heart here. This isn't sweet romance. This is darker and spicier. So we'll go with a circle instead. So if you tried to pick out the gold color, it's just not going to work. Because you see, it's actually made up of several different colors. And those metallic colors just don't tend to come out well as a single block of color, because they're not a single block of color, I'm guessing. But what will come out really well here is some of this red. Now look at that. And that really brings out the red, and it kind of gets over the monochrome nature of the hero, the love interest there. And what price is this on sale for? $2.99. Let's see. Let's give ourselves a bit more room here. I'm going to zoom out a bit more. Zoom out a bit more, but I want to keep that nice framing. And now actually we've created a little space for ourselves for a banner. Yeah, let's change that shape actually and go down here. We want to go behind the book cover. I think that looks better. And, you know, I think what's going to naturally catch your eye in this design is the snake. And your eye is going to follow the length of the snake like that, and maybe all the way down to the snake's forked tongue. And then here is where you want to put something important. So I'd be tempted to do a more simple design because there's a lot going on here. You got the roses, you got the guide, the watch, the tattoos, the snake. And, you know, it's very stylized. So I don't feel like you want to add in too much here. So I might just put the price here and call it a day. And yeah, I think this could work. We're not going to use that font. That is Canva Sans. And if you take one thing out of these videos, please don't use that font. I see it absolutely everywhere. It's not a bad font, and I think that's why it's so ubiquitous. But it's not great. And once you start seeing it everywhere, you get very sick of it. And I think anyone who's on Facebook will see that font a lot. And I don't know, I'm starting to mentally associate it with kind of like dodgy products that people buy late at night. And I don't think that's the impression you want to give off when you're advertising a book. Okay, let's try something like this. I like that font. I haven't seen that one before. Garrett. Nice numbers. A lot of fonts have bad numbers, but these ones are nice. Again, you could try and match the font more closely, but I think this is fine. And I'm saying that because I'm at least 50% motivated by the fact that I desperately want to eat a sandwich. And yeah, I like this though. Something like this. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good ad, you know. I think I'd probably move this over a little bit, but I kind of like this. I don't want to mess with this too much. I feel like, you know, there's lots of things I could do. I could add in more layers, but it's already so kind of full of stuff already. It's already quite glitzy, and there's a lot of elements in there. And I think if you're putting in more stuff, everything is just going to go into a kind of a smudge. Now we'll zoom in and get this right. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good ad. I'd test that anyway. And yeah, there we go. Okay, guys, I hope you found that useful. Next week, we're going to tackle a different design challenge. What to do when your cover just won't play ball at all. What do you do when you can't use the cover for the background in any shape or form, and you have to come up with something else? So I think that's what we're going to try and tackle next week. Either that or box sets. I had a lot of requests to look at things like box sets. What do you do when you have a 3D book image? How do you handle the design? Why do I always choose that flat cover that you've seen in so many designs? Why don't I put it in a little Kindle box or on a tablet or on a phone thing that you see? So we'll try a few designs like that, and I'll explain the pros and cons and when to use it, when not to use it. So I think that's what we're going to cover next time, but who knows what's going to happen in the next episode of the Image Workshop. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. That really helps a lot. And definitely let me know what you think of these designs in the comments. Which colors were your favorites? Was there any that you didn't like at all? What would you like to see more of? Let me know. And if you want to find out how to submit your book for the Image Workshop treatment, please check the description and the comments as well. Okay, see you next time.